Yo, what's up? I'm here at the base of Mount Shasta here in California right now, here to tell you about a very important and conceivably controversial topic, and that is the negative side of identitarian politics. Right after this. So we're at a really interesting point in history right now. We're at a stage, again, seems to be constantly repeating in history, where a group of people will create an identity and a meaning around that identity and then around that group. Now, while that's not necessarily bad, when it gets to the point that you begin to demonize other individuals for being in other groups that they may or may not be able to control, that's where we get into severe danger. I'm sure you're familiar with authoritarian, totalitarian dictatorships like that of Mao, Hitler, Stalin, various other. I think there's one I'm thinking about in Cambodia, like the killing fields and something. There's a guy who killed people because they wore glasses because he thought they were smart and he was a little concerned about that. It's a problem. Basically, just a run-of-the-mill, average Joe definition. It's basically when you create politics around your identity. When the identity becomes more important than the things that you espouse or your values, the identity, the people, they all become that. And you see this in, the dictatorships like Nazis. The Nazis are a great example of this. They created this idea of wanting to create a superior race and that the Jews were not. And then they went on this propaganda campaign, which you may or may not be seeing now in 2020, about how these people are in power, this is a problem, we need to eliminate them. And that's basically kind of what that is. But now, there's pros and cons to having identitarian politics. The pros are, if you don't have much, if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't think you can do a lot of things, then it makes a lot of sense to go along with a group. It makes a lot of sense to go with an identity that is going to move you forward, you would hope, right? You feel alone, so I gather with people who either are ideologically like me, maybe even look like me, and we create sort of a tribe. And basically what this does is creates a form of tribalism. And once you have that affiliation in that group, then finally you can start doing things. The problem with this is that unless you have complete synchronicity with everybody involved, it leaves zero room for individuality. And that's a problem if you're watching this and you're somebody who's a viewer of mine and you're like, I want to make myself better, I want to do better in life. That's in your way, number one. So that's the major problem. It stands in your way if you're somebody who wants to better themselves. It stands in your way if you're somebody that wants to stand outside of the crowd, or that maybe your personal belief about this identitarian group isn't exactly cookie cutter, exactly what they want. The concern of that is that if that group gets so rigid, then they will shut you out, and then you don't have an in to opportunities that you might have had in sort of a more free system. So that's one of the biggest issues. Another issue we're seeing is sort of shame, and you can see this in pretty much every sort of identitarian group conflict in the world. You look at, trying to think here, like the Hutus and the Tutsis, that'd be a great example. I would call that a racial war. I need to look it up to find out what exactly you would call that. But basically you have the Hutus in Africa and the Tutsis in Africa, and these are people that are both Africans, both African descent, but they look a little different. They have a little bit different culture, I believe. And as a result, there's massive conflict, at least in that particular country. And what you might have seen in something like that would be a form of shaming, like, oh, you look like this, or I think it was something to do with the nose, I can't remember, like the bridge of your nose is too wide, that's not okay, shame them for that, eliminate them for that. It's bad. You don't want to eliminate people. You want people to feel free and feel like they can be what they want to be. Because when you shame people to that extent, whether it's for how they look or what they believe in, you shut down the discussion. So if you can't win in a discussion, you just shame these people for being a certain way, for something that they can't possibly change, or maybe they could change but they're choosing not to, and you shame them for that. There's really nothing that the shame side can do. And in many cases, you would see like the shame side turn around and shame the other side back for doing the same thing, believing that same identity group, and basically creates this war. It's another form of tribalism, and it's all fueled by a collective ego, a collective thought body of ideals, and it creates chaos, frankly. So basically the biggest issue is if you buy into an identity collective, it eliminates your own personal ability to decipher how you want to live your life. What do you want to do? Where you want to go? That was one of the reasons, for example, like a fraternity. I wasn't super into the fraternity. I liked the idea, I liked the benefits of it, but it also meant that I had to spend like all my time if I was going to rush for a fraternity in college, and it wasn't like that. And then you had to only, hang out with people from the frat and things like that. You could only, go to parties, and you only had this much free time. And so that would be a form of like a lightweight sort of example of like an identity, sort of like an identity group. I would never say that those folks would be waging wars, but on a grander scale, if the collective ego of a group gets big enough and gets rigid enough, it can cause crazy things, some of which we're seeing right now in 2020. Don't want to mention it, don't really want to date it exactly what I'm talking about, but look up what happened in 2020, and think about it for yourself. So those are just some of the negative things about the identitarian politics that you see throughout history, and I believe are resurfacing today in 2020. So I just thought I'd bring those things up to you. Enjoy the beautiful drone shots, and I'll see you next time.